Hello, ladylings and gentle nerds. My name is Dux, and I'm going to be bringing you a Heart of the Swarm beta replay today. This is just a game that I played on the Heart of the Swarm ladder a little while ago. It is a ZvT between myself, Dux, playing as NV Jazzbaz, up in the blue, against a random ladder opponent by the name of Mask of Apathy. Just a pretty crazy name. So he's over here in the red as the Terran. So this is one of the Heart of the Swarm maps. I can't remember the name of it. I don't really remember any of the map names at the moment, but it's just a kind of interesting game that I want to showcase some of the cool new units and how these new abilities really affect the dynamic nature of the matchup, I should say. So in the past, I mean, we've seen the evolution of ZvT, where it has kind of gone from this sort of bio play initially back in the beta in the early days of Wings of Liberty. And then we saw a lot of interesting Reactor Hellion play, which became pretty stale over time. It was just kind of like the standard sort of play that we saw for a very long time, opening up with that 14 gas Reactor Hellion opening into a fast expansion. And these days we're seeing a lot more 1-Rex expand without any gas. So if we check out my opponent's base, he is in fact getting that gas at around 14 or 15 supply. And meanwhile I'm going for the pretty stock standard 15 hatch expansion. Getting my pool a little bit after, and delaying my gas until much later. Now, in the current state of the beta, what most Terrans are doing is they are doing that old school Reactor Hellion build, but rather than just kind of running in and trying to kill all your drones, they wait until they've got about 6 Hellions, and they'll do a massive run by right into your main base. Once they get to about this point here, or even behind the mineral line, they'll activate Battle Hellion mode, which takes about 2 seconds to transform. And then the Hellion gains significantly more HP, allowing them to absorb a lot of damage, and it reduces their attack range in favor of a wide cone attack. So a lot of Terrans are really relying on the Hellions to do a lot of that early game damage these days. But in this case, my opponent's actually doing a little bit of the classic tank marine, so we don't see any of that. But nonetheless, that is exactly my reasoning for getting this early Roach Warren. You'll see I skipped metabolic boosts, so Zergling's not very useful when you're up against Battle Hellions. They've kind of really fallen back in the early game these days. And yeah, so at this stage, just trying to boost up my economy as much as possible, getting a few roaches out so I can deflect the typical timing where these Hellions would be arriving, which would have been about 15 seconds ago. But because he ended up getting the double barracks beforehand and going right into that siege tech, as you can see on the production tab, my roaches weren't really needed to defend anything. So you can now see in Heart of the Swarm, you can see the radius of your opponent's scan. That was what those little yellow arrows were. So you can tell if someone scans your base and you're trying to hide tech, for example a Dark Shrine or a Stargate or something, you can see exactly whether or not your opponent saw it, which is a pretty cool feature. Now here I'm walling off the ramp a little bit so I can really prevent the ability for those Hellions to run up into my main base, allowing my roaches to secure this little spot here. Now these collapsible rocks, once destroyed, will seal the entrance to my third base so that my opponent cannot get in. A fun fact about these rocks is that if you have a structure or any units in the path of where these rocks fall, they will be destroyed. So you need to be careful, especially when there are some maps, I can't remember what it's called. There's a 4-player map that is like a big long stretched version of Metalopolis, and it actually has rocks next to the expansion. So you can collapse those rocks to prevent your opponent from expanding there. So you would see them here, for example. Or, as a funny little twist, if your opponent decides to expand adjacent to the rocks, you can destroy them, and then the collapsible rocks will fall on top of their hatchery or command center or whatever it may be, and actually destroy the structure. So generally it's something you want to be destroying before you take the expansion. So you can see my opponent now working his way through here, trying to lay down siege to my third base if I had one, but of course I can see from the Overlord positioned here what he's trying to do. So, completely aware that he's attempting to get up the ramp here, I threw down another 2 spine crawlers. Use my roaches to pick off any units that get a little bit too eager and come up the ramp without vision. And I was hoping to get this Battle Hellion because they actually absorb quite a lot of damage with that 135 HP. As you can see, that's more than a Marauder. Battle Hellions are pretty versatile now. So in the meantime, I know that this the slow push has been delayed a little bit, but the inevitable siege line up into my natural is going to happen soon enough. So I work on getting some swarm hosts out. So as soon as my lair is complete, you can see I've got a baneling nest and an infestation pit on the way, as the infestation pit is required in order to get the swarm host, as you can see here. So the Swarm Host will allow me to kind of fight back against his siege. I can position my Swarm Hosts outside of the siege tank range and spawn the Swarm... I don't even know what they're called. The Locusts, I think they're called. The Swarm Hosts units. And then they can go and buffer a lot of siege tank fire. They can get a lot of free damage on his units, and also allow me to close the gap between his army without taking any damage on mine. So the Swarm Host is a very, very underrated and undervalued unit at this stage of the game. I feel like it's going to have a pretty vital role in ZvP in the future, and may even be important in ZvZ, but it's hard to say because the Viper is so damn good that it might actually change the stale styles of ZvZ that we've seen for so long. So you can see now 3 Swarm Hosts in production. They don't take too long to build. And I think I have the +1 attack and armor on my ranged units because I was kind of committed to going Roach Hydra and Viper from the very beginning. It's something that I really, really wanted to try against this tank marine style. And I mean, as I pointed out earlier, Ling's really not good against Battle Hellions. So, yeah. This may be the future of ZvT. It's hard to say at this stage. So you can see now, as soon as you borrow the Swarm Host, it spawns Locusts. Without an upgrade, they don't last very long. You can see they're only lasting about 10 seconds. But at this stage, it allows me to pick off a few units. You can see the Battle Hellion's gone down. I've done some damage to the Marauder. And these units will just continue spawning over time, forcing him to unsiege and vacate this position. As soon as he unsieges, it opens up an opportunity for me to reach forward, pick off the tank, and get back into my base. So now that this base position is secure, I've accumulated quite a lot of money, unfortunately. I'm willing to take a 3rd and a 4th base. Now this is the upgrade I was referring to. It's called Enduring Locusts, and it increases the lifetime of Locusts by 10 seconds. So as far as I'm aware, that's pretty much double their lifespan, which is pretty damn helpful. In some scenarios, you won't actually get within range of the opponent's army, depending on your positioning, before the Locusts expire, so definitely one to pick up. So you can see now I'm picking up melee attack for Zerglings as well, because I decide that since this guy's clearly playing Tank Marine and Marauder, he's not going to have any Battle Hellions on the map, so I'm going to capitalize on that for the time being, and get out a bunch of Zerglings. So you can see the Enduring Locusts upgrade is also on the way, with my Hive and a Hydralisk Den, as I take these 2 additional expansions. Meanwhile, my opponent, just picking out that +1 bio attack, happy sitting at the top of his ramp at the moment as he secures the 3rd base, and he'll be floating that down here soon enough. So, at the same time, I'm just kind of sneaking around looking to see if my opponent's taken any secret bases, and there's nothing like that happening. My opponent now looking like he wants to move out and take another attack, bringing a few SCVs along to repair the tanks, which is always a good idea. Something we should see far more often. And I just want to highlight something that's a little bit unfortunate about the Heart of the Swarm. I really, really hope they change this back. Is that the repair button used to be up here. So if you wanted to activate auto repair, you just kind of automatically right click on this little icon here. But now that it's down there, you end up just right clicking gather and it does nothing. So just something to be mindful of if you're someone who uses auto repair. So my opponent now moving across the map for yet another attack. My Groove Spines, which is the Hydralisk range upgrade, is almost complete. My Enduring Locust is finishing just in time. And I'm trying to get a good position here to catch his army as it moves towards my fort, but I end up having to cancel the fort at the last moment. And unfortunately I sieged up at least one of my Swarm Hosts within range of his tanks, just on the edge there. I'm trying to lure him out of the tank radius so I can catch this bio out of range and then sweep in with the Swarm Host to pick off the tanks, but my opponent not letting it happen. Very, very quick on the scans, and unfortunately I do lose those 3 Swarm Hosts. So for the time being, I realize that he's going to be looking to siege up my natural from the low ground, similar to what we used to see a lot on Tal'Darim Altar. So I decide that now is the time to get the Viper. Of course, the Viper only requires Hive tech. It doesn't require any additional structures, so once you have access to the Hive, you can make Vipers freely. And they're not very expensive, which is very, very good. So you can see this new upgrade here, the Muscular Augments upgrade for the Hydralisk, which gives them increased movement speed, is currently being researched, and 3 Vipers are now in production. So my wall here, kind of delaying my opponent, forcing him to siege away at these buildings using his medivac for range. At the same time, I'm looking to take a flank pretty soon. So I'm moving my my army around the back so I can catch off all of his reinforcements. And once the Vipers are ready, I'll be looking to pick up all of his siege tanks and pull them up onto the high ground, where my Zerglings will ambush them. Of course, once his army is without siege tanks, it'll be much, much more vulnerable. And of course, with no reinforcements, he'll be really, really struggling to hold this attack. So, supply count really, really tells a bit of a story here. This poultry army here does not stand much of a chance against what's going to be coming at it pretty soon. Now, the Viper does not spawn with enough energy to use the abduct ability immediately. It needs to be alive for about 15 seconds to generate enough energy. They can use this consume ability for free though, and this allows them to drain life from a building in exchange for energy. And so you can see I'm actually building a bunch of additional evolution chambers so that I can consume them later on when I need energy. Which is these evolution chambers here. So it's almost time for me to abduct the tanks, and here we go, pulling the tanks up onto the high ground. Allows me to swarm in with the Zerglings and take them down without any reinforcements. So now that the tanks are all over and done with, I can swarm in from both sides. Units sweeping from the back, and I believe another array... Yep, here they come. Another array of Zerglings are coming down the ramp. That allows me to clean up the attack pretty cleanly. So you can see here how the Viper allows you to really, really take a key position in battles like that. Whereas in the past, I would have had to sweep my army all the way around the ramp through his bio army if I wanted to engage those tanks. And without any units such as Mutalisks, it becomes really, really difficult to deal with that. So at this stage I kind of realized, okay, I'm in a really good spot, I can take that fourth base now, I'll even take a few more. I was saving up so much money during those engagements that I was just happy to take as many bases as I wanted. And I decided I would get some Banelings and have some fun using the Vipers to pull his army into the Banelings. So you can see I'm consuming the evolution chambers that I produced. They're a very, very cheap structure with a lot of health. I'm almost certain that this is probably the best candidate to use consume on. And now my Vipers have more than enough energy to use abduct and blinding cloud. So blinding cloud is a really, really, really powerful spell to be using in this sort of scenario, as it reduces the range of biological ranged units to 1. So that includes marauders and marines, obviously, and of course ghosts and other such biological units. So it basically forces all of his marines and marauders to move into melee range of my army if they want to do damage, or they need to retreat out of the cloud. And at the same time, I'm able to abduct the tanks and pull them to my army. So it basically gives my army the mobility advantage, whereas he sacrifices, or he forfeits, the Terran range advantage, which is very, very important to them. So you can see my opponent now saturating that third base. It looks like his main has dried up completely. Yep. He's actually getting a fusion core. It looks like he wanted to get battle cruisers in this game, but I don't remember seeing any. And my creep spread, unfortunately, was pretty heavily diminished throughout that attack. My creep is all the way out to the Zelnaga Watchtower before that engagement, but he did manage to clean it up with some nice scans. So you can see I'm now taking additional bases all over the map, pretty much just being a jerk, being extremely greedy, taking hatcheries here, there, and everywhere. You can see the new silhouette for a building in construction that comes with the Heart of the Swarm, rather than the old green wireframe. So at this stage I'm pretty comfortable with my mineral income. I just decided that I wanted a lot more gas. So I was basically just making extractors at each of these bases so I could increase my gas income, and not bothering with the minerals. So you can see here once again, the Viper is playing a pivotal role, allowing me to cast blinding cloud on his entire army, forcing the Marines to move into melee range, where they were completely demolished by those Banelings. And at the same time, a few tanks were also abducted into my ball of roaches and hydras. So you can see here how fast the hydras are moving. They're actually keeping up with the roaches, and if we just compare the movement speed, that's 3 on the roaches and 2.81 on the hydras. So almost identical speeds from speed roaches and speed hydras. And of course, they move even faster on creep, which is something very, very important to consider. So after crushing that attack, I was well aware that I'd already won this game, but I didn't want to end it yet. I wanted to have a lot more fun with the Viper, because this is my first time using the Viper, and I really, really wanted to experience exactly how powerful this unit could be. So I thought I'd just have a fun little game and throw some engagements away, sacrifice a few armies, and do crazy little things like that. So Viper's now retreating to go and consume some more structures back home. And I made, I think about 8 swarm hosts. Yeah, 8 swarm hosts, just to park around the map all over the place and see if I could pick off idle units as they were moving past and that sort of thing. So you can see here, immediately, as soon as you borrow all 8 swarm hosts, bam, an entire army of 16 locusts with that massive 18 damage spawning and available to be deployed against his army. And you can see right here, I'm actually killing off a lot of marines, and this is for free. These locusts don't cost me anything. By the time they're killed, the respawn cycle is complete. So I guess that's the other important thing to note about the Enduring Locusts upgrade, is that it allows your existing Locusts to last until the next spawn cycle, which is very, very, very important. So you can see here, just Lings and Locusts almost entirely demolishing his army, and now Vipers, after consuming those evolution chambers, pulling his tanks in range of the Locusts, where they can be picked up for free. And again, my army, like, not even existent, it's just Vipers and Swarm Hosts able to demolish the Terran forces. So at this stage, the purple is kind of consuming the entire map. Base is being taken everywhere. I haven't saturated any of the gases over here yet, only this base here. As you can see, I'm still floating a lot of money, just happily allowing my opponent to throw little attacks at me, and I had a lot of fun deflecting them with Vipers and all sorts of fun units. And you can see these evolution chambers are almost dead because I've consumed them so many times. So throughout the game, you probably want to build a few more evolution chambers here and there, just to try and keep that Viper energy up. Now, there's one thing I really want to focus on here, is that one of the coolest and most interesting things about Heart of the Swarm is that every race received a very fragile caster unit that cannot attack. It just has really, really game-changing spells. So previously we only had units like the Medivac and the High Templar, and they had great spells, and they served very, very important roles in the game. But now this has kind of added an interesting new dynamic nature where it changes compositions, and it really influences the way that some battles are played out. So you can see again using that Blinding Cloud just to force his army into range, within range of mine sooner. And I saw this extractor was almost dead, so I figured I would consume as much energy from it as I could before it went down. And this one as well, since I'm not mining from it at the moment. So now my opponent, trying to do as much damage as possible, just moving all over the map, trying to deny bases and pick off hatcheries, but it doesn't really matter. I'm not mining from these hatcheries. I'm happily just allowing him to take them out so that I can enjoy all of these engagements. So again, Lucas single-handedly dealing with this army. I decided to crash all my Banelings into a Marauder just for shits and giggles. And again, Roach, Hydra, and Viper is the strength of my composition at this stage. So now my opponent deciding to pick up Blue Flame for his Hellions, although I don't think he actually has any Hellions on the map. If we just check that Units tab, no. Just a Banshee, 7 tanks. Was 8 tanks, but he accidentally destroyed one of his own just then. And yeah, a bunch of bio. So here we go again, Viper's on full HP. I can't actually see his army right here, but I know it's there. And then again, Blinding Cloud on the bio, forcing it to move back away from the cloud. And as soon as I see the tanks, in comes the Abducts. I pull them into my army. Tanks are now completely useless to him, as I can now deal with the rest of his army. Borrowing my Swarm Host right at the front, moving my army back, allowing the Locust to buffer, taking all the damage, and then finishing up the bio army. So one thing to consider is, unlike the Lurker from Brood War, the Swarm Host does burrow almost immediately. Obviously there's a small delay throughout the animation, but it does allow those Swarm Hosts to be in the battle very, very quickly. It's not like a Lurker where if you're not pre-burrowed, there's a chance that you're going to lose a few of them in the process. So again, just letting him kill off my army so that I can have more fun with Vipers and messing around a little bit. At this stage, my opponent kind of kicks his aggression into overdrive and starts fleeing around the map all over the place, picking up bases here and there. And we have a couple of fun little skirmishes. Look at that, a Hydralisk just killed that tank so quickly. It's insane. So unfortunately, in an attempt to transfer workers to this base over here, Marines do kill quite a few of them off. There was a Banshee attacking this base up here, but I did manage to pick it off with that Spore Crawler. My opponent now really trying to kill off a lot of hatcheries. You can see my Evo chambers are getting really low. So I ended up building another 6 or so somewhere. Oh, I built 2 here actually. I forgot about those. So my opponent losing a portion of his army over here, and then the tanks moving in to take out this base down here. This is actually a pretty terrifying army. That is a lot of tanks capable of demolishing anything on the ground. And I was completely unaware of how many tanks he actually had here. But fortunately, even though I move into a bad engagement, the Viper really changes the landscape of this battle. As we can see here, the blue army of mine now moving across the map, looking to engage his army. And so many tanks just being pulled out right into the midst of my army. And now there's nothing to protect these Marines from the Banelings. At the same time, my opponent once again moving out with the Bioforce to snipe another hatchery. Doing a great job of picking off hatcheries, but unfortunately I just don't need the money. I'm not even mining from most of these bases. And I guess that's one of the advantages of this composition, right? With the Roach, Hydra, Viper composition. It is extremely effective. Normally, if you want this sort of efficiency, you need to start making tier 3 units like Broodlords and Ultralisks. But you can get away with just relying on these tier 2 units and going toe-to-toe with the Tank Marine composition, thanks to Blinding Cloud and Abduct. So the Viper really changing this matchup. Once again, another tank being abducted. Blinding Cloud on the Marines, allowing these Zerglings to get within melee range. And again, his army just has nowhere to go. It needs to move out of the Blinding Cloud if it wants to do any damage, but there is no hope for them. Oh, little hero Baneling. So, another drop just kind of sitting here, waiting to do some damage. And there it is. So I feel like over time, as people really master the Viper, it will become one of the most instrumental units of this matchup. I don't know about ZvP, but definitely in ZvT, and the Blinding Cloud will be very important in ZvZ as well. But yeah, players will become really good at managing their energy on the Viper, constantly consuming structures to keep their energy high. You can see my opponent has Widow Mines borrowed at the top of this ramp, in case I attempt to circumvent his wall and come up the side, which is a very good move. These Widow Mines will latch onto anything within this range, as you can see the white circle around them, indicating how far that they can attach to a unit. And they will detonate instantly. There is no timer like you would have seen in the battle reports a little while ago. They detonate instantly, doing area of effect damage. Massive area of effect damage. Really good units. So me just again kind of having fun with my opponent, trying to take out this planetary fortress, but apparently a billion SCVs can keep it alive. So I decided to pull back and just go for the main base instead. So again, this Roach Hydra composition. 2-2 upgrades just about to finish. Blinding Cloud going all over the Marines and Marauders, and tanks being pulled off the high ground right into my army yet again. The Abduct just being so powerful. And it's at this point that my opponent finally discovers that his Marine Marauder tank composition just simply cannot compare to these Roaches, Hydralisks, and Vipers. So that pretty much wraps up the game. And I just wanted to share that with you because we haven't really seen too much of the Viper used practically yet. A lot of people are just trying to rush to them and see what they can do, and obviously on their own they're not very useful. But when used correctly and introduced to a composition that really supports them, they can be an absolute game changer. So I hope you enjoyed this game. I know it wasn't the highest of quality, and of course both players not exactly fantastic, but it does get to showcase some of the units. And that's what a lot of people are looking for at the moment. Thank you for the tank. GG. I'll see you guys next time.